Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land of which we record. We pay our respects to elders, past and present, who are part of the world's oldest continuing culture and the first storytellers. We acknowledge the importance of supporting health for all peoples, now and in the future. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are warned that this podcast may contain the voices and names of people who've passed. Welcome to the HeartKids podcast. Join us to hear stories of Australians affected by childhood heart conditions. On this podcast, you'll hear from heart kids and teens, heart adults, parents, carers and family members, cardiologists and other health professionals. My name is Rachael Knowles and I'm one of your hosts. I'm a journalist and I live with a congenital heart condition. I was born with tricuspid atresia and had Fontan surgery at the age of 2. I'm passionate about people and their stories, and I'm excited to walk with you on this journey as we share experiences and learn more about those of us living with childhood heart conditions. Today's guest is Carlye Crank, a clinical psychologist who supports people from all walks of life in looking after their mental well-being. She's joining us to explore how health experience can shape how we think and feel, and to share ways we can care for our mental health even if life feels unpredictable.
My whole bandwagon is about integrating mind and body, right? And we're not even close to being there yet as an industry for people routinely to ask people with physical health conditions, so how are you coping with all of this? How would you describe your mood or your emotional state at the moment?
Before we begin, a quick note. This episode includes discussions on mental health, medical trauma, and the emotional impact of living with ongoing health needs. Some listeners may find certain topics confronting, so please take care while listening and pause if you need to. Welcome, Carlye. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, where are you joining us from today?
I am on Bunurong land in the southeast Kulin Nation, also known as Bayside, Melbourne.
Oh, beautiful. I'm so jealous. I'm really excited to have you on and to pick your brain tonight. I guess, can you, tell everybody a little bit about your work background and your experience working with people who have had chronic health conditions?
Yeah, definitely. So I am a clinical psychologist. So that is someone who's typically done 6 years of formal study and another 2 years of extra supervised practice study. So I'm also an academic and have worked in healthcare settings for about 15 years or so. And what continues my spark in this field is a really integrated approach to healthcare. So I obviously love the mind and love mental health, but also that interplay between physical health as well. And of course, we all have our own environments and systems and health systems and support networks and all those little spaces in between. So I find this field really stimulating, but also there's a lot of work to do, I think, to integrate all these things. I am also a mum and a mum carer to a little girl who is now 13 months old. She has some really serious and complex medical conditions herself, so I bring a lot of lived experience into my work as well. And so part of that is advocating, navigating, fighting, all the things when it comes to health and being a voice for my little person.
Yeah, I can imagine it's a whole new kind of experience to know the systems academically and to work in them, but then to advocate in them. You're doing so much across both kind of worlds.
Very much so, yeah, different hats. So,
yeah.
Yes.
But all that knowledge, I imagine, is incredibly helpful.
Yeah, it is in part.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, look, many of our community have experienced medical procedures, emergencies, hospitalizations, and a lot of them from a really, really young age, some from birth, like myself. And often, I think being so young, we don't have the language or the access to support to process or understand the experiences. So I kind of wanted to start off by asking you, I guess, what is medical trauma? And I suppose how might it show up years after the experience or the experiences of medical trauma?
Definitely. So medical trauma is not a diagnosis. You won't necessarily find it in a textbook, but it's a term that's I'm glad to say has been more and more used and recognised. It is essentially when you have negative experiences with the healthcare system in any way, then people have an emotional response to that. And trauma can look like anxiety. It can look like, someone having a lot of fears. It can be someone's been through, a significant life-threatening event and they're emotionally impacted by that. And so someone who's maybe had, a congenital condition, experienced anything from a young age, they often have lots of contact with the healthcare system. And the more contact you have, the more exposure you have to potential negative events. And that could be at the hands of others, so the health professionals that you interact with. It could be things going wrong. It could be things that are genuinely scary, like medical interventions, surgeries, that sort of thing. And so it recognises the emotional toll that people have when they're experiencing their healthcare journey, and it's very personal. So I'm sure you'll find that no two people experience medical trauma the same.
Yeah, I'm interested in. So you said having like negative experiences. I suppose for people who may have felt that they have had good experiences, they might still have kind of a general anxiety about going to the doctors or appointments. Is that related, or is that a potential medical trauma symptom?
Yeah, definitely. So I think our brains tend to have a bias towards the negative experiences. It's almost like all the positive experiences since then doesn't necessarily cancel that out. So that's one thing. But the other is our brains are adapted to be efficient and not necessarily accurate. And what that means is that we try to protect ourselves from harm. And so it's actually more adaptive to focus on the negative and focus on the experiences that we'd like to prevent or avoid in the future than it is to focus on the positive ones. So it makes sense that they linger. And sometimes negative things or the emotional toll associated with negative things doesn't come way down the track until someone's maybe physically more well. Physical symptoms tend to take a priority, and rightly so. That's sort of the way our building blocks are meant to operate. I have this experience a lot, but it's almost like as soon as you book the holiday and as soon as you take the time to go on your annual leave and you get sick, it's kind of like that, where it's very annoying, but it comes up when we just have that little bit of extra space to be able to process something really emotionally difficult. But sometimes it also, it comes up as a reminder as well. And so we might just have this slight little kind of whiff of a reminder of something from our past, and it's a trigger. It triggers that memory flooding back. It feels like it's happening in the moment. And yeah, it's something that screams at you to pay attention to it right now.
I think when that kind of things happens, and look, for myself, I think that I probably prior to about 2023, thought that I had relatively good experiences. I'd heard stories of not having good experiences, but I didn't really identify that had impacted me. And I went through I was involved in a medical trial. I had an issue with, I have always been a little bit funny about getting my bloods taken. And something happened. We tried one too many times. I got triggered. I had a horrible reaction. Now I am so anxious around needles. Now all of that memory of, having to kind of be restrained when I was younger to get my needles all came back. And I'm really interested, I think, in that kind of, I suppose, the kind of lifting up of the experiences that you've had. You may feel fine for years and then something might change that. Is that a common experience?
Yeah, definitely. It's like a treasure trove of trauma, isn't it? That it's like, okay, these things were sort of neatly packed away, and it doesn't take much. For you, it sounds like it was a real, reminder, and then suddenly it unlocks all these memories that you'd kind of forgotten. Sometimes it's not even related. Sometimes it might be you've had something go on in your personal life, like a breakup, for example, and then suddenly it's like, oh, well, that was a negative emotional experience, and our brains go, this feels familiar. What other negative emotional experiences have I had as well? So our brain networks are related like that. We have this kind of filing system in our brains, and it files things that feel familiar close together. And so it is literally just, not literally, but figuratively, an unlocking of this treasure trove, and then it all comes out. Yep. Despite your best efforts for it not to.
Oh yeah. No matter how much you're like, yeah, it's fine. It's there. I guess being in that moment and realizing kind of, oh my gosh, there's a lot of stuff that I haven't not even processed because I didn't realize it was there. How do you begin to process that? Or what does processing that actually mean in an everyday kind of work, I guess?
It's a good question. So processing to me means making sense of an experience and having a sense of meaning as a result of that. And so what that could look like is, you might need to understand why something happened. So some people, really get involved in, the science, for example, what is happening in my body. Some people might really look at the sequence of events that led to something really difficult and they go, okay, I can see how this happened. So processing is your very own personal experience of making sense of it. Ideally, processing would result in what's called a post-traumatic growth experience. So we kind of come out of it a little bit more healed, a bit wiser, a bit, feeling kind of stronger or more sure of ourselves in that process. So that processing looks different for everyone as well. Sometimes it can be a sort of a direct healing. So it might be going to see a therapist and it might be going to work through trauma or PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. For others, it might be a bit more personal than that. Some people don't like to kind of think about seeking that formal support, or they may not be ready yet, and that is perfectly fine. But processing could be something as simple as I'm going to choose an activity and I'm just going to allow my brain to just go through what happened in my own time and really just allow the dust to settle and feel like I have this level of acceptance over what's happened. So that could be through expressive means, it could be through art, it could be through gardening, it could be, even just stand-up paddleboarding, and you just allow your brain to just go through what it's been through and feel settled at the end of that processing.
Yeah, I really love it. Giving it the time to do that.
Yeah.
I think moving into adult life when you have like a heart condition, there are a lot of challenges that pop up, and that include our health needs or the impact of our younger years in the medical system. And I think emotional exhaustion is particularly common, but not always, I think, recognized. And I suppose, what are some of the emotional impacts that can build up over time when someone does have a lifelong health condition?
Yeah, definitely. There's many, unfortunately. So emotionally, it might look like this really strong sense of fatigue. You might feel incredibly physically tired, but you might feel emotionally tired as well. And for a lot of people, that feels like a bit of a sense of numbness. It might be a bit of like meh or lethargy or, everything just feels a bit too hard. Things start to blend into each other and you sort of start to feel that sort of low energy and low care factor for a lot of things. So that can happen to a lot of people. It also could be a little bit on the opposite end of the feeling spectrum. So people could feel incredibly anxious. They could feel worried. They could feel irritable, angry, agitated. So exhaustion, can kind of look at those two different ends of things. And I suppose there's a lot of warning signs as well to be on the lookout for when you do feel exhausted. It could look like your sleep has changed, so you might be sleeping more or you might be sleeping less. You might start to isolate yourself from others. There are a whole range of emotional impacts that exhaustion has on the individual.
I'm always interested, and I think particularly in the heart community, there's a real kind of priority around physical health. And I think we put that first, and we kind of push the emotional stuff to the edge when we have to deal with this first. Why do you think we downplay or that we ignore our mental health?
Yeah, I guess it's not as obvious, is it? When we're going to the doctor, we're in the medical system, it's a very medicalized industry. People are asking about symptoms. People are asking about things that you can measure. And emotions aren't necessarily forefront of mind. You sort of mentioned at the start, my whole bandwagon is about integrating mind and body, right? And we're not even close to being there yet as an industry for people routinely to ask people with physical health conditions, so how are you coping with all of this? How would you describe your mood or your emotional state at the moment? And so it's not part of the dialogue. And if so, you're someone with a physical health condition, you're going to lots of these appointments, it's almost like your emotional system just fades into the background because it's not being asked. There's all sorts of competing demands here when it comes to emotional impacts. is that you can't ignore that people tend to have their own dialogue about their physical condition, and often, and I find particularly in the cardiac population, there's a lot of survivor's guilt. And so then emotions tend to get dismissed or denied or invalidated, or, oh, if, but I survived, and but I have this, and but I need to be grateful. And so we stigmatize emotions when that's the case, and therefore they do take a bit of a backseat.
Yeah. What are the common signs? I suppose I feel like most of us kind of know that might be at play, but if we're not disclosing that to a health professional, what are the signs that we can look for, even though we might be functioning, at a normal level, keeping our head above water? What are the signs we need to look for to actually be like, oh, I know this is something I need to deal with. This is something I need help with.
Yes. I think the sneaky thing with cardiac conditions is that they mimic cardiac symptoms as well. It could look like fatigue. It could look like memory issues. It could look like anxiety, palpitations, chest pain, that sort of thing. And so again, we've got this feedback loop, don't we, to re-enter that medical appointment and that medical dialogue as well. So I suppose the message here is that there tends to always be a link between physical and mental health in the cardiac population. So it's something to really be aware of, and something to keep up that conversation amongst all your peers around, how is your mood tracking? Yeah. How do you know the difference between anxiety and palpitations, or your own heart symptoms and the, what you go through emotionally? So in terms of recognizing that, it's about being a really, really cluey detective and going, well, okay, I'm actually going to, allow myself the time to notice my emotions and look inside and start to get to know them a little bit better. But also, I guess, permit yourself to feel them. It doesn't matter if you survived, or you've been through all of this, or you should be blah, 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 grateful, whatever it is that those dialogues are that are preventing those emotions from being heard. You've been through a lot, no matter what you've been through. And I think it's really natural that you do have emotions as a result.
Yeah, I think exactly what you were saying, and I think we're a particularly difficult bunch sometimes. And I think there's always, and I know for myself, I've very internalized that pressure to be quote unquote normal and to keep up. And I think I felt that very obviously as a child, but now it's not so obvious for myself. I push myself to keep up with my family without realizing that they're starting from here and I'm starting from here. So my colleagues, my friends, my family, what are the signs of, I suppose, that emotional burnout in chronic health conditions? And I guess, what is the value of boundaries in that conversation?
Great question. So I suppose what we're going from here is that sense of early warning signs and understanding your emotions to that point of burnout. And burnout can look like all those emotions really ramped up on overdrive. It could also look like you're at the point where you're no longer really functioning. So, your memory might really be suffering, and you might be forgetting things, or you might have difficulty, at work or your daily life with things. It might be that, your sleep is getting really poor, that it is getting in the way. You might start to really isolate yourself, push people away, cut yourself off from friends or family. So it really is that sign of, okay, things are really taking a turn from your usual operating self. As well as there are some other sort of clues around that sense of sensory overwhelm and feeling really heightened. For example, a lot of people just cannot handle crowds or noise when they used to. You're sort of hinting there, Rachael, and I'm sure yourself and a lot of your listeners would be aware of the spoon theory, for example, that you only have so many spoons of energy in any given day. And sometimes you're out of spoons before you even, get out of bed and get dressed. And that's all you have. And that can be really difficult for someone who doesn't have a chronic health condition to understand that there are limits, and that you do start with a lower threshold and a lower amount of energy a lot of the time.
Yeah. I find it very difficult in my life, I suppose, to set boundaries, because I want to keep up. I set those boundaries. I find it hard sometimes to communicate why those boundaries are there. But I think more so when I get pushback on a boundary about my body or about my health needs, or that boundary is maybe minimized, I find that a really difficult situation to be in. What is your advice on how to advocate for yourself when your boundaries are compromised?
Yes. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because that sense of pressure to want to keep up and, operating at a really high level and maybe pushing yourself leads people to not really see that you have less spoons or that you have less energy. And so, we've kind of got this reputation now of being like, well, Rachel used to do all these things, or, well, I don't understand. Like, they sort of forget that you might have a heart condition. So I suppose setting boundaries is a skill, right? It is an art form, and not everyone's going to respect it. Not everyone's going to understand it. My advice would be to write yourself a script and rehearse it yourself over and over and over until you feel that you are saying that assertively, confidently, and firmly to people who need to hear it. And so that could look like, hey, I would love to catch up this week, but I've just got too much going on. Can I get in touch with you in a few weeks and let you know how I'm going? So, it doesn't have to bear all. It doesn't have to be this over justification. You never have to justify a boundary to anyone, by the way. And so some people do need that do need it repeated, unfortunately. Some people do need it a little bit firmer. And some people just need you to go, do you know what? This is it, full stop. And then I'm going to leave it at that. So really, really difficult when people don't necessarily hear you. Yeah,
I think it's something that, like, it's one of those things I'm learning that I'm never going to be perfect at, but it's going to be a work in progress my whole life. I think COVID was a particularly good time for me to practice that. So I would, after COVID, everybody wanted to hang out, but I had to say to my friends, if you are ill, I can't see you. And that boundary has continued now in a lot of my relationships, where if you're sick or unwell, you need to tell me before we hang out. I can't come.
It's a really good example, isn't it? And I think a lot of people are in that boat. Yeah, it's suddenly like, okay, the world has opened up. Let's catch up. But it's still terrifying to a lot of people. Yes.
Yeah. I suppose I am really interested, I think, in particularly having early medical trauma. There seems to be sometimes quite a disconnect between body and like mental health. And I suppose you spoke a lot about like sitting with it and letting your mind process it. But when you do have that disconnect, I go, what are the ways that we can begin to kind of reconnect and build awareness around our mental health and how that is showing up physically for us as well?
Yes. So one of my favorite skills in mental health is building your own emotional vocabulary. And so that is learning words to describe how you feel. And so not only do you then understand the word and the feeling and the experience of that emotion, but you're able to communicate it to others as well. So there are some really great tools out there. There's something called an emotional vocabulary wheel, and it lists the different emotions, which is really great. So you can choose them, you can become familiar with them. There's a really great academic called Mark Brackett. He does lots of work in the field of learning your own emotions. His field of work is called Permission to Feel, and he has an amazing app called How We Feel as well. And it's quite visual, so you get to kind of choose different colors and different shapes as to how you feel, and it goes into what that emotion is and what it might mean to process that, or what are some coping strategies as well. So I see emotional vocabulary as sort of that foundation block. If you can't understand and describe how you feel, we need to get that on board first, and then you can learn how to deal with it, how to cope with it.
I think I remember my therapist showed me the feelings wheel.
Yes.
I loved it so much. I ended up buying a lounge cushion of the feelings wheels. Whenever me and my housemate need to have a little bit of debrief, we get the emotional cushion and we're like, how are we feeling?
Yeah.
It's so helpful. It's one of the best things because, sometimes I don't know and I need the words. I'm like, yes, I do feel frustrated. I do feel disrespected. I do feel sad.
Yes. Yeah. And what a beautiful example to connect with others over that as well. Because some people are so limited. And again, if we've only had this kind of medicalized world that we've been immersed in, you might just feel bad or sad.
Yeah.
And people go, well, why do you feel sad? And so it's really hard to kind of, see and hear the shades of grey when you have a limited language for it. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. For some of the adults in our community, I think thinking about the future, whether that is planning career or family planning or just kind of imagining what life will look like to 5 to 10 years, that can feel really uncertain. And I think how can someone start thinking about planning or moving into the future when their health is really unpredictable and they have that kind of question mark above what things will look like for them?
That is a really heavy one. Okay. So I suppose firstly, honouring that that's an incredibly difficult situation when you may have a chronic health condition, but you also may have acute episodes and setbacks and things that are unexpected along the way too. So you're dealing with so much uncertainty. So of course you're going to want to plan and take control and figure out what you can figure out as much as possible. It may not be possible to plan 5 years ahead. And so you may have a decision to make around, well, okay, what is realistic for me in terms of a time frame to work forward to? And that may not be, well, okay, in 5 years' time, I want to be able to go skydiving. It may be, okay, well, what's realistic for me to do in 6 months' time, and make a goal around that. So bite-sized, chunk it down into something. I think it's really important, though, and really, really common in people with cardiac conditions to think about family planning, think about fertility, and think about the future as well. So I think that sits a little bit differently in that you want to get as much information as possible, and you want to be in front of the right set of eyes and the right set of ears to tell you the information that you need. For example, fertility issues and whether it's possible to freeze eggs or embryos and start that process, and when's the best time to do that. So there is a balance here around, okay, ask some questions about your future and who is the right person to speak about that. And when it comes down to the more personal aspect of things, make it bite-sized, choose what you can control and accept what you can't. Contingency planning is okay, having some backups. But my advice would be to keep it shorter term than you'd really like it to, but have some fun goals in there as well. Make sure that you fill your own cup. Make sure you have some things that will bring you joy and that will make you feel fulfilled when it comes to setting those goals for yourself.
I think when we talk about like mental health support, it is really complex and really difficult to get mental health support in the world that we're living in, unfortunately.
Yes.
And I guess for people who are maybe teetering on that point of like, oh, look, I don't think I need to go see a psychologist at this point in time, but I do need to build a bit of a toolkit. What are some ways to, I suppose, invest in your mental health and look after yourself that, are a little bit more accessible?
For sure. So there's a number of support organisations out there. So cardiac specific supports, HeartKids being one of them, Heart Foundation, for example. So there are, supports by way of helplines, but there are also peer forums, which I think are really useful as well. So linking in with people with similar experiences. You can also find them on Facebook. Like you don't have to go down a formal route to get support, or if you're, considering it or don't sort of want to go through, the heaviness of booking a double GP appointment and going through a mental health care plan and when you're not quite sure. So I think some of those internet-based access points are great. There's also lots of, self-guided tools out there, be it apps, be it online workbooks, for example. There's really fun colouring books for mental health out there if you wanted to build your vocabulary and basic coping strategies as well. So there's heaps of information which can feel really overwhelming. I can certainly provide some links that we can display as well. And of course, there is that, formal route of going to a GP, mentioning to your cardiologist or your other health providers as well, to be linked in and just start those conversations. So, finding something that makes you feel comfortable in the first instance, ideally finding someone who makes you feel comfortable to support you and talk through whatever you're going through, are the places to start. There's lots of options.
Yeah, beautiful. And I On the kind of other end of the spectrum, when you know, for instance, somebody like myself who has maybe had a relatively good experience with the healthcare system and then happens to have an episode or a moment that triggers them, you can be really heightened in those moments, and you do need like support. You need somebody to guide you. Where should people turn to? What should people do in those kind of moments?
Yeah, absolutely. So problem shared is a problem halved. So take someone with you, seek support through someone you trust. It doesn't have to be someone with lived experience. It doesn't have to be someone with credentials. Sometimes it's just really beneficial to have someone there as a distraction as well. So really personalize your support. Don't be afraid of it. I'm really, really glad that this day and age, particularly in the post-COVID era, a lot of people are much more aware of emotions. A lot of people can sit with others' emotions, and there's lots of campaigns out there to help people respond and help people, you know, display empathy and help you feel cared for. So don't be surprised by reaching out to someone and having that conversation with them, because chances are that you'll feel better afterwards.
Yeah. I think there's some things that you touched on that I thought was really interesting. And I think the first one is, I think the comment that I get a lot from people, and particularly men in my life who have thought about therapy, is that they've engaged with a therapist but didn't quite fit with that particular person. And I would love your advice on the reality that sometimes you do have to shop around. Sometimes you have to find the right person. Do you think that's
Please shop around. Yes. You know fit when you feel it. And so I really, really encourage people to go online, look at people's profiles, email them, ask for a lot of psychologists and other mental health professionals will do a phone call with you to see if you're the right fit, ask the right questions. It's helpful to have someone with cardiac specific experience, just because there is a significant correlation between cardiac issues, medication side effects, etc., and mental health, but it's not required. As long as you feel safe with that person, as long as you feel heard, and that they can support you with whatever needs you have, then go for it. Shop around.
Shop around. And my second question is, I think doing this podcast, you know, I have had an experience of being a heart kid, but I also have watched, and my parents' experiences are entirely their own, but I've watched them, and I've watched, I suppose, the kind of emotional and the trauma that they have had. And doing the podcast, I've had the privilege of speaking to a lot of parents of heart kids. And I think it is very much that survivor bias of we survive, we get through, and then we worry later. And their priority obviously is always their child. But I think not much emphasis is placed on their mental health through this process. So I suppose what is your advice for carers of children who do have chronic health issues or do have disability in moving through the system with them and realising their own trauma?
Yeah, look, can relate. And I suppose it is a bit of a delayed priority, isn't it? Around, you want to be there for your child and you want to make sure that they have everything you need. And of course, you're going to sacrifice anything and everything for whatever they go through. I suppose it comes down to recognition, isn't it? That there is such a thing as carer burnout, for example. It's incredibly emotionally tiring to care and worry and to support someone who's really unwell and who may not be able to advocate for themselves. So I suppose it's about giving yourself, again, permission to feel, to use that term, but also there are lots of services out there for carers as well. So linking in with carer support services, a lot of, you know, hospitals and health services will have even just kind of support groups in, you know, coffee catch-ups, just to talk about what you've been through. Yeah.
And I think that's, what I appreciate as an adult now is I think when I was young, it was very strength mindset. We get through it. We're resilient. I can appreciate now realizing that having conversations with my parents about that time in our lives, we're both sad about it, but we've never spoken to each other about it. So it's been nice now to have hindsight and work through that together.
Yes, and you probably want to protect each other from that as well.
100%. I think it's particularly hard in these scenarios. You know, there's no one to blame. Things happen. You just have to look after each other, and it's big impact.
Yeah, and how nice as an adult that you can now go back and have those discussions and almost model to them, right? If there's been a lot of support or a lot of awareness for people going through it, to be able to say like, hey, we've all gone through this.
It is, it's a traumatic experience, but it's, a lot of beautiful things can come of it, but the heaviness is still very much there.
Yeah, definitely.
Beautiful. Carlye, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your expertise. It has been wonderful to be able to pick your brain.
Thank you.
And I'm sure many people will get so much out of this. So, very appreciative.
Thank you so much.
This podcast deals with some heavy things. If this brings up anything for you or somebody that you love, it's important to reach out for help. The HeartKids helpline provides support, advice and guidance for people impacted by childhood heart disease. You can call the helpline on 1800 432 785. To access more information about childhood heart disease as well as support from HeartKids, visit the website heartkids.org.au. The information on this podcast is not a substitute for medical advice from your doctor or healthcare team. Always talk to your doctor about matters that affect your health or your family's health.